Well, it's lovely that our Dharma friends have come to share this day with us. The Abbey community decided that it really wanted to participate in this National Day of Remembrance, commemorating the 2nd anniversary of the shooting of the children and the teachers at Sandy Hook. And we wanted to just do something, you know, and because we are a monastic community and a community of Dharma practitioners, I really personally felt that how we experience and how we share this day means something. The way that we work on our minds, the way that we articulate our experience as these tragedies continue to unfold in our country, that the way that we work with our minds means something. And there have been over 60,000 deaths from gun violence in Sandy Hook, which is a horrific statistic. And so what we want to do is, you know, what do we do when we hear those kind of things? Now, the sponsors of this weekend, there's a lot of wonderful foundations and nonprofits that have kind of organized themselves because they really felt that the voice of those who say we've got to do something about this escalating violence in our country, including a lot of interfaith-based organizations. So being a faith-based community, we thought that we would really like to participate and have our voices heard today. And that so much of our practice is the practice of non-harm, of generating compassion and tolerance and forgiveness and wisdom. And at the same time, being very aware that working on our afflictions so that they don't compel us to create our own form of violence within our own minds in relationship to ourselves and others. And we've got to really remember that so much a part of spiritual practice is really paying attention to our own minds so that we don't become part of the cooperative conditions for the violence and the chaos and the rage and the dysfunction of pretty much our system that's going on right now. And to come from a place of compassion and wisdom. And then from that place, if we wish to take social and political action, we come from that place. And that compassion is a very powerful mind. You know, it doesn't cower in the face of violence. It's a very courageous mind. It can confront the strong stream of rage and fear and confusion. But how do we call it forth? How do we cultivate it? Now, what does that actually entail? In our minds, I don't know about yours, but my mind in the past few weeks, I've been really having to watch it because I'm falling into despair, I'm getting discouraged, I'm getting enraged, I'm getting confused. So how do we, and that's part of the dialogue today in this sharing, is how do we cultivate and how do we grow this compassion when these afflictions are also in our minds as well? And that, and how do we use the Dharma to help broaden this beautiful bodhicitta perspective that fosters the kind of wisdom and clarity and compassion that we need, so that we don't withdraw from the conversation, or we don't say, well, I can't deal with it, or it's too much, or what to do. So we want to be able to have a kind of mind that can really address this in a practical way and in a spiritual way. And when I was listening to Venerable, she did a BBC in Singapore in regards to they didn't indict the police officer who killed Mr. Garner in New York. And she, you know, after she talked a lot about what that meant to her personally, is that she really said, you know, we have to continually remember that to see that every one of us is under the control of afflictions and karma, just as much as these folks who are perpetrating the kind of violence that's going on in our country. It's much more intense in their minds because they're being compelled and propelled to act from those states of, you know, anger and rage and hostility and paranoia. And that given, and that she keeps reminding us that given the same dire circumstances of conditioning and karma and environment, we could very well have been compelled in the same circumstances to do not much different than what they've been doing. And that what happens in these situations, if we're not careful, is going to be us and it's going to be other. And this is where the finger pointing and the blaming and the rage can happen, because we disconnect from the fact that these beings are part of the human family. whether it's the gunman, whether it's the Black community, whether it's the police, is that if we don't see that just like them, that we are just like them, under the control of afflictions and karma, we put them in that category of other, it's so easy then to justify the afflicted states of mind that arise within our own minds. So she said we always have to remember that we are in the same sentient being family under the control of the same afflictions and the same karma. And that even though it's hard to imagine that a human is capable of massacring people or killing somebody for the infraction of a minor law, that we still have that potential within our own mind streams. And she says that is so important for us to remember. And that so today we are going to kind of remember those of our human family that have died from violence, not just of gun violence, but of violence in any sort of way, to hold their families and communities close, to hold the perpetrators of the violence and those who condone their actions in our hearts as well. We've got to really think that this is a human family dilemma that is shared by every one of us, and in a larger context, it is a concern of the whole family of living beings who live on this planet. So that's part of what we want to really share our thoughts, our feelings, our practice today. And how does the Dharma, how does the Buddha's teachings really guide us when these very difficult, tragic situations arise, really close to home, it's very close to home. And what we wanted to do today too as well, kind of as maybe a juxtaposition or maybe as part of our aspirations and hope, is that we wanted to bring Lama Tsongkhapa into the space today. He was one of the great Tibetan realized beings in the 1300s. He was one of the founding fathers of one of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. He was a scholar, he was a meditator, he was an author, he was a debater, he was a monastic. And he was born in Tibet during a time when the Dharma was really degenerating. The monastic Vinaya was just deteriorating because a lot of the monastics were really going for the happiness of this life. Their vows were degenerating, they weren't keeping them. The Tantra was being totally misunderstood. Just the general Buddhist teaching were being really not taken to heart. And so when he was born in the 1300s, he totally restored in a very profound way by his example, by his teachings, by his scholarship, by his books that he wrote. He really helped to bring the Buddha Dharma up until almost like kind of this enlightened time in Tibet due to his efforts. And he is considered to be the emanation of Manjushri, who was the Buddha of wisdom in that Buddhist tradition. And it's always exemplified is that it's kind of a light. So on Lama Tsongkhapa Day, which is going to be celebrated on Tuesday here, we do with soap and other things, is that we usually fill the space with light, kind of symbolizing this incredible mind of Dharma light that he brought to our world, but also the light of wisdom and compassion, which are the kind of qualities that this country, if it needs anything now, it needs the light of compassion combined with the light of wisdom to be able to address this with each other and to really be able to bring it out of the darkness, which is where this country seems to be tailspinning, is into this dark place. Is that Lama Tsongkhapa, through his teachings, his commentary on the Buddhist teachings and on his understanding of the Dharma, he really brought the light of Dharma to Tibet, and I think we can really bring it into our minds and hearts today, that light of his profound teachings and his great compassion and wisdom. So we're going to try to put those two things, kind of interface them together in our sharing. So hopefully we'll be able to really find that place in our hearts and find out where we struggle, where we're kind of caught, and then to be able to celebrate in friendship this day and to really keep in mind all the people in this country, whether they've taken to the streets, whether they're going into their places of worship, or whether they're sitting around their tables, or just by themselves walking in the woods or wherever, just thinking about how do I feel about this and what can I do, both internally and externally. So that's what we're